Welcome back to Kitchen Table Care Chats. Today we're sitting down with someone who knows that caring for others, managing work, navigating change, and trying to hold everything together can sometimes leave us feeling stressed, overwhelmed, and wondering how much more we can take. Barb Fletcher is a leadership capacity specialist, coach, and the founder of Barb Fletcher and Associates. Through her own experiences as a caregiver, a single mom, and someone who has navigated significant change in her own life, Barb understands firsthand what it means to face stress and uncertainty. Today, she helps individuals, teams, and organizations break the cycle of stress and overwhelm, build resilience, and find more calm, clarity, and balance. Her work includes HeartMath coaching and training, helping people develop practical tools they can use both at work and in everyday life. So grab a coffee, pull up a chair, and join us at the kitchen table as we chat with Barb Fletcher about stress, resilience, and finding your way back to yourself. Welcome to the kitchen table.
This Kitchen Table Care Chat is proudly brought to you by Surge Learning and CareLink. Surge Learning supports care teams by keeping staff engaged through career development, accessible policies, and clear insight into learning and performance trends. The focus is on helping teams feel confident, supported, and prepared in their roles. CareLink connects healthcare professionals directly with facilities, offering a flexible and efficient way to fill shifts with trusted, qualified staff. By simplifying staffing, CareLink helps teams focus more time on care and less time on coordination. Together, Surge Learning and CareLink support the people and systems that keep care moving forward. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Why don't you start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you've gotten to where you are today.
So I've been on this journey for a long time. I spent 35 years as a civil servant, and throughout that time, I developed all kinds of stress that showed up in some physical symptoms for me. And for a long time, I played that game of whack-a-mole where I would push the symptom down and try and resolve it. And all of a sudden, after what ended up being 3 separate night guards that I wore for TMJ, which was jaw pain, the dentist said, "That's it. We're not doing this anymore. We're going to send you to another province and break your jaw and wire it shut for 6 weeks."
Wow.
That became a bit of a burning platform for me to figure this out. My whole career was in aging and aging care, and that's a bit of a story because I had no plans to spend my time in the care environment. My mom was a nurse, my sister, my aunts, everybody were nurses, and when I started out, I studied business for the very fact that I wasn't gonna be a nurse. And about 5 years into my career, I became the director of nursing home services. So some of those things that are part of who we are, the essence and the caring piece, we can't shake it. So the stress was bubbling up for me when I was working, and as a result, I needed to find strategies. And one of the places that I landed, I have many, but one of them that I landed on was something called HeartMath. And it came about because it had lots of science behind it. And I knew that if it was something that resonated with me and I wanted to share it with others, being in the environment I was, that people were looking for, show me the proof or the science behind it. And so that was a real attraction factor for me and something that I've hung on to. Yeah.
That's amazing. And can you tell us a bit more about the heart math? I know we've had conversations a bit about it before, but somebody that's never heard of it, can you tell a little bit more about that?
So the other feature that drew me to HeartMath was the fact that the tools that you learn, and I'll talk more about that, are ones that are real time. So we hear a lot about self-care and strategies to look after ourselves, but often they're separate from what we're doing during the day. And these tools, the perfection in those are that we can actually practice these tools, mitigate that stress throughout the day, and nobody even knows we're practicing. So all fine and good. Yoga, I have a yoga mat sitting close to me. But when I'm feeling stressed and I'm out and about, you can't just say, I'm going to roll out the yoga mat and a few stretches. And in the healthcare field, that's even more so. So HeartMath was developed almost 40 years ago. It, as I said, had lots and lots of peer-reviewed science. And the focus was on self-regulation of one of the really cool facts is that our heart sends more messages to our brain than the brain sends to the heart. Why that's so important is because we often think we can think our way out of a situation when the truth is we have to feel. So HeartMath focuses on real-time solutions, techniques, tools, awareness to help us self-regulate.
I love that. Yeah. I love the feel, like, it's so true, your body knows before your mind, so
Yeah.
amazing.
You spoke about in the beginning about symptoms, like physical symptoms. What kind of physical? Because I know for me, I'm the same way. I'm I'm emotional, but when I'm stressed or anxious, it comes out of me much more physical than me feeling sad or feeling tired. Yeah, it comes out. So, what kind of symptoms? If I'm curious, did you
So, so I mean, physical symptoms that people, for me, it was the jaw pain.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
For others, it could be things like sleep. It could be back pain. It could be digestion, you know, and we discount, as I mentioned, we discount all of those things, whether it's, I went to bed late or I had that cup of coffee or, I've got a headache, but, I didn't sleep right. Or, we label it often as something else rather than understanding that stress may be playing into it. And awareness is really where all the magic lands because the more aware and the deeper our understanding is of what's triggering us, what's activating our nervous system, the more likely we are to be able to use those techniques to mitigate that and stop the drains.
Absolutely. I always tell myself now when I feel, for example, I get this sensation of tingling in my extremities, and especially like in my nose, like I would feel itchy on my nose. I'm like, oh, what is that? And every time it comes now, I instantly know something's triggering me, something's stressing me out, and I start using tools that I've learned throughout my life to kind of bring myself down, and I don't panic more because before I would be panicking more and more that I'm feeling this way, and I ultimately like get more stressed out and more anxious. Yeah.
Yeah. And, they don't always, those symptoms don't always show up at convenient places.
Gosh, no. No, it was not.
They often happen when we least expect them and in ways that we don't expect. It could be that, we react differently than we might, we get very quiet,
Mm, yeah.
that we don't participate and we're not as helpful or as patient. And so we don't, if we don't have that awareness, like you spoke of the tingling, then these symptoms just happen to us. And people around us experience them, the good, the bad, and perhaps the ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly. Certainly. Yeah.
What do you think, Barb, goes from that, like, normal level of stress to, like, okay, now we're not functioning where we should be, or the stress is, like, a bit too much and taking over and we need to intervene? Where's kind of that fine line between, like, a normal level versus not?
The tipping point is when we're feeling stress all the time. So stress
Mhm.
that we need stress to get out of bed in the morning. We need stress to take action. We need, everything we do has a certain level of stress to it. But if there's never any relief valve to that, if it's constant, then we know that we may have tipped over and our nervous system is, on high alert 100% of the time. And, you know, it's like, we've got our foot on the gas and we don't know how to let it off. And over the long term, those physical symptoms that were symptoms can become dis-ease, from the stress that we're experiencing.
Absolutely. You were talking a bit about your role. You got into the director of nursing role, which anyone who's worked in those roles, including myself, I find that was one of the most stressful roles I've ever
Mhm,
completed, which I'm sure you probably found the same.
mhm.
How as a leader did you cope in that role, and did you use any concepts from heart math during that time?
So early on in my role, this is a funny story. So my regular menu of choice was I would have in the morning, I would have not healthy, don't recommend it to anybody, a Diet Coke and an apple fritter.
Yes.
So my day would go on, and if it was a stressful day, and this was many years ago, we had vending machines that had the not so healthy things in the staff room. If it was a stressful day, I would go and get a bag of chips and a chocolate bar. And so secretary would know that if I was coming back with the chips and the chocolate bar, that that was a stressful time and they should stay away
Oh my
uh,
god, funny.
during that time. But throughout my career, I would have used these techniques to help me self-regulate real time
Mhm.
because you're right, the stress does show up, and as a leader, we put everyone else first. We're high performers. We're showing up. And what I'm seeing now with leaders who come to me is they're just out of gas.
Mm.
They're still performing high, but below the surface, it's pretty scary. And
Uh,
so it's really about having that capacity built in. So as a leader, you can draw down on it over time, keep investing again. And we liken this a little bit like a battery in that you add energy to your battery and when you need it, you draw it down a bit and you actually, you move. It's an ebb and a flow. But what happens is leaders deplete their battery and
mhm.
they're still showing up. They still look good, but the inside's not so good.
Right. So
Yeah.
true. So
Yeah,
true.
it's you never know what's going on under the surface, like you said, and it's really great though that your team could even pick up on some of those triggers. And I would have very similar experiences, but I was a caffeine addict. Like I never left the facility. I ate through lunch. Also, do not recommend you do that. So if I had to step out and go get another coffee, you knew I was having a really bad day. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the nonverbal clues that people get to see and pay attention to. And we do what we need to do to cope at the time when we don't have tools.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Speaking of some of your tools, and I think this just kind of rolls in nicely with each other, but you were talking before about your leadership coherence index. Can you tell
Mhm.
staff and again the listeners a little bit about that and what you do with that tool?
Yeah, so the Leadership Coherence Index, what's really special about this is it helps people understand how much capacity they have, and then we can develop strategies to move them to a more full and resilient being. And we can do that in a number of ways. We can understand how much resiliency they have in the organization with a short questionnaire. We're able to have a conversation and do a bit of an assessment. But we're also able to do an individual assessment where the person can take a 10-minute statistically valid assessment that looks at how does stress show up for you in your life. We talked about physical symptoms being one, but we also have relationship stress. We have social support stress. We might have work stress. We might have emotional distress. There's a series there that helps us understand where, if we could pull one string that might help all of these, what would it be? Because it's not usually, stressed over everywhere. Sometimes our perception, because when our stress scores are high, our perception gets a bit out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're able to bring that stress down, those other things aren't really as troublesome as we thought they might be.
Mm-hmm.
So the kind of two layers, a layer that looks at how they fit in the organization, and then a self-assessment that helps them reflect a little more for themselves, which, we have to know where we land in the beginning, or otherwise we don't really know where we're going. And that's what makes this different than a lot of other tools, because a lot of tools just say, well, you're here, so we're going to move forward. But if there's a whole story behind that's built on sand and the resilience doesn't exist the way we want it to, everything we can do out in front is going to be wobbly moving forward because there's no foundation there.
Great.
Yeah, I can see that like in parenthood quite a bit. Is that there's like a lot of stresses like in your work or in your relationship or just like personal stresses, and then it's reflective on your children. Your children are not necessarily making you stress, which they do, but a lot of the times it's outside stresses that end up giving you like that little bit of anger when it comes to parenting. So a lot of the times I'm not mad at them. It's usually that there's something going on a little bit more deep that's putting me off edge in terms of my
I
parenting.
have a fun story about that. I had a nurse leader I was working with. They were in a group of probably 8 or 10. And after the first session, she said, my kids, I have nothing left for them when I go home. She said, I pull in and they're fighting and they're hungry. And, she was a leader, so she was working regular shifts, not even not even nights and evenings. She was on a day shift. So pretty preferred experience for nursing that many don't have the luxury of choosing. And so I said to her, well, she learned one of the techniques, and I said to her, when you get home and you pull in and you park your car, I want you to spend 5 minutes in the car practicing this technique. And so the next week she came back to the group and she said, you're not going to believe it. I said, oh, really? My children have changed.
My children have changed. I love that.
They feed off your energy. If you're stressed, they're
But the
stressed.
children hadn't changed.
No,
Was
feeding.
her reaction and her perception and all of that. But it was 1 week. That's
Wow.
all it took for her to change and make that shift. So it's one of my most fun stories about how effective the tools really are.
That's
Yeah,
so
that's
cute.
wonderful. And probably only took about, a little bit, maybe up to 3 minutes of that. I'm not sure what tool she used, but the smallest little change
Exactly.
made a huge impact.
Exactly.
That's wonderful to hear.
That is.
Yeah,
I love that story. That's adorable.
yeah, that's adorable.
Of change. I need this tool, by the way.
Ask me for a friend.
Yeah. No,
Exactly.
can you tell us further? You've been doing a bit of work. I believe it was with PCWs on resiliency. I know you do the one-on-ones, but I think you're doing some group work, is it?
Yeah. I'm working with an organization in Moncton that's training personal service workers. And it's actually I had a session with them earlier today, and it's just lovely. We're doing it over 12 weeks, and we do a 30-minute recorded video that they watch. It's a YouTube video. And then within a day, they complete a Google form, which gives me data as to how well they understood the topic. And then we do a 30-minute live session a couple of days later that actually serves to integrate all of that information and make it real as to what their workspace is like. And it just so happens this group, many of them are immigrants. And so they're, they're studying, they're working, their family may be here or they may be in another country. And so we're managing and helping them look through each of these stresses to understand how those drains are occurring. And, one of them today, which was lovely, said it was when she did the Google form that she actually understood how complex and how overwhelmed she felt with her schedule. And so without that exercise and actually seeing it in front of her, she just thought that was normal.
Wow.
So, and I'm thrilled that these people who are training have these tools before they go into the workplace, because we are going to prevent that burnout. We're going to prevent miscommunication. We're going to help them with decision making. And, they and their families are all going to have a greater chance of thriving than
Yeah.
they might have otherwise.
Yeah, that's a very stressful time. You come in and so much change has probably come to them in a new country and there's
Language.
yeah, absolutely.
Huge culture shock. I always think about that. It's just, I went to Asia and it was such a culture shock just being in Asia. And I was there for vacation. Imagine moving your entire life to a country that you don't know the language or culture, normalcy is just totally different. I know there's like a story where a little boy came here from overseas, and in kindergarten they all are sitting on the floor in front of the teacher reading a book, and the student was like, I'm not sitting on the floor. Like, thought it was so not normal, and because he didn't want to sit on the floor, it like went through a lifetime of I don't know if that caused it, but didn't really integrate with society in the classroom just because his normalcy is so different. So I just think about on a family perspective, coming in here, not knowing the culture, managing those stresses, then scheduling stresses, parenting stresses, and all that come with it. Like, not having those tools, that would be,
And
you know,
the unifier with HeartMath tools is that every one of us breathes
always.
and everyone has a heart. And
Yeah.
so it brings everybody together with a common language that, even regardless of how we got here or what our experiences are, these two things are common for everybody. And so that creates I think, a different ability to implement and capacity among a group. And, when we're training 8, 10, 12, I think there's 14 in this group, they then have their colleagues and peers to rely on to remind them when they're feeling a bit stressed as they're studying or they're doing work on the floor. They're not necessarily alone. We've all taken a one-off course and it stayed inside of us. And some days, on a good day, we remember, and on a not so good day, it's not there.
Yeah.
And for those groups that you do, are the leadership quite actively involved as well? Because sometimes we talk about resilience and staff
Hmm.
not adapting well, but sometimes it's actually leadership. So when you're doing these, do you see those leaders actively involved, or what does that?
So one of the things I like when I'm working with teams is I prefer to work with the leaders first. If they don't buy in and don't understand the value, then it's something that they're just insisting that these other people do. And so what I have found is that when the leaders get on side and the leaders understand this work themselves, and they get surprised about where their stress is showing up or where their stress has decreased with some practice, they then approach it very differently. And they can use the same language with the students. So in this case, this organization might give the students a few minutes in class to actually get some things done if they need to. They may actually encourage them to practice coherence in the class, and which then, of course, allows them to be, more, their thinking to be clearer. They're going to be more articulate. The relationships are going to feel better.
Same.
I love that you start with the leaders first, because I think you're right. If you don't have the buy-in from the leaders, it's not going to be something that's going to be sustainable over a long term. So important to do that. Do you, for leaders,
Mhm.
I know I've talked to you quite a bit about that, but we talk about healthcare quite a bit, but what other type of leaders do you work with if somebody were to reach out to you?
Mm. So it's not limited, but I think what's challenging in this day and age is entrepreneurs. People who feel like they're alone, maybe they're doing multiple roles in their business and don't necessarily aren't aware when stress might be derailing them, when stress may be causing them to take more time to do particular activities. I've worked in investment groups. It really isn't limited. It's the willingness and the interest to feel better. The challenge is that people don't self-identify on the emotional side. They usually identify on the physical side. That's the one that, when they start to lose sleep, when they can't focus, when relationships become difficult, those are the times that people show up. So there really isn't a limit, you know, the sweet spot, I have a passion for healthcare. And even though I didn't think that was going to be where I landed,
Where did you think you were going to land? I'm curious.
I studied business.
Business, your business at heart. Oh,
Yeah.
I've heard this quite often, business turning into healthcare. I don't know why. What's the correlation there?
Well, I think well, for me, there was a thought that I was not going to be something. And I think when we are wired in a particular way with a purpose, staying away from that isn't necessarily a healthy approach.
Right, right.
It finds you.
It
Finds you.
Nursing finds you.
does.
Well, we are actually almost at half an hour, Barb. Thank you so much for coming on. But I want everybody who's listening if they wanted to reach out to you, if they wanted to talk to you more about what working with you might look like, what some pricing might be, those types of things, how would they get a hold of you?
So I have a website, which is just barb-fletcher.com. And I will provide all my contact information, and you can put it in the show notes, which makes it easy to click on. I do, these kinds of coaching relationships anytime we're dealing with emotions, and we need to make sure it's a good fit. So I ensure that we spend at least 30 minutes making sure that the work I do resonates with that person, and we can look at an assessment to see if there's some clues there, and it's they're in the driver's seat, I guess is what I'd say.
I love it. That's important as well, the right fit. So I'm sure everyone appreciates that. Why don't you leave us off on one final? If there was something that you could tell healthcare workers about stress or resilience, what would it be?
I think the key is that we need good stress, but when stress feels uncomfortable and feels difficult, it's time to understand it a little more and see what the tools are.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So
Thank
much.
you, Barb.
We really appreciate
Amazing.
your time.
Yay. I'm going to do a clapping. I had to, guys.
She's having fun with this new recording tool.
I know. I had to. Thank you so much for coming. That's awesome. I'm really great that there's these tools out here that we're able to share, and your story is great.
Thank you.